Right. I think I'm live. I'm just going to assume I'm live. Hey, everybody. Tom Hazzard here. Podetize, Feed Your Brand. Brandcasters is, of course, our company and our Facebook group name. Thank you all for watching today. This is our weekly client coaching call, and I have a fun topic I'm going to record as a podcast, just me, solo cast today. Tracy's on a plane as we speak, out to do business on the East Coast for the next more than week. So I get you all to myself today. This is going to be fun. I'm going to geek out a bit. This is about podcast discoverability. And I'm going to share my top 3 keys to podcast discoverability. And so that's the topic. And I'll probably spend about 20 minutes at most on that, then open up the call to discussion, Q&A, whatever anybody would like to talk about to help move themselves forward. Happy to answer any questions you might have. All right, so let's see, I'm already recording. And wait, I got to bring up my outline just so I don't lose my bullet points. There we go. Okay. Hey everyone, welcome to Feed Your Brand. I'm Tom Hazzard, your host, and today I am going to share with you my top 3 keys to podcast discoverability. And that's podcast search discoverability in particular. Okay. So I'm going to just quickly tell you what they are, and then I'm going to dive into each, and I'm going to, give you a little fair warning in advance. I love this stuff. I geek out on it. And oftentimes it really conflicts with a podcaster's brand vision and identity or beliefs, and I'm going to share why in a minute. And but in any case, the 3 things are the unique brand name dilemma. That's the first one. That's what I'm calling it. The second one is the unexpected landmines of the author field, which is another part of your podcast listing. The third is the most ill-considered part of your podcast identity that's holding you back from being found. Okay, so those are the 3 things I'm going to cover today. And let's start with number 1, the unique or brand name dilemma. Now, look, I love brand names. I mean, my business, my show's called Feed Your Brand. Our company brand name is Podetize, although it's not our company name. That's our brand name. We do business as Podetize. It's our domain name for our website. And that's a made up word. And yeah, sometimes when I say Podetize, some people might, think, how do I spell that? And that's sort of the downside of having a unique brand name, especially when it's a made up word or a word that's a combination of other words. And you have to live with that. There's sort of pros and cons of having a unique brand name. Well, when it comes to your podcast listing, if your show name, and again, we're talking about discoverability, making sure your show gets found by more of your ideal listeners. When you are really looking at your podcast listing from a discoverability perspective, you really want to pay attention if you have a unique name. Now, I'm going to use 2 examples. One is of a relatively new customer of Podetize, and one is a prospect I met with recently, where I was reminded of this with both of their names. And one of them I had a podcast audit with, where I review the podcast, and we do this as a company for lots of people. So yeah, shameless little plug here, but it's completely free and there's no obligation. But you have an existing podcast and you want to get an audit of your podcast to make sure you're optimized for discoverability and learn many of the other pitfalls that may be holding you back from being discovered, because I'm only sharing the top 3 today, and there's really about a dozen different points that you really need to make sure are optimized to make sure you're found by your ideal listeners. You can go to podetize.com/audit and sign up for a free audit. So what have you got to lose? You might as well do it. We provide a lot of value on that audit for free. So back to the unique or brand name dilemma. So Example number one is a new customer. I love this podcast. I think especially for women in business, women entrepreneurs, it's a great show. The show's called Her C-Suite Radio. And when you have a name like that, that is, unique, and Her C-Suite Radio, clearly this podcast is intended for women, which is great. You know who your audience is. That's wonderful. But this name, when I first saw it, it is a words that are combined. Her C-Suite is one word, Her, the letter C, SUITE. And the C-suite being the corporate executive positions in an office. Your vice presidents, your officers, your president, VP of marketing, VP of business development, VP of operations, whatever. The C-suite, it's intended for top executives that are women. Wonderful brand name. The first time I had only heard the name. I hadn't seen it written, and I didn't know it was one word. And guess what happens? When I search Her space C-Suite, the show doesn't come up. It's like the show does not exist in the podcast listening apps, in the podcast ecosystem, and even on Google. Now, the podcast search engines, the search bars within your favorite listening app, I don't care if it's Spotify, Apple, iHeart, any of them, they're bad search engines. I'm just going to straight out say it. Okay. These are not the most sophisticated search engines. It's not like it's Google or, even Yahoo or Bing or something. I mean, the vast majority of searches in a browser, internet, happen on Google anyway. But even Google isn't always going to put these two together. But that really is secondary, because when people decide they want to listen to a podcast, they're going to go to their favorite listening app and they're going to search. And if you've only heard the name of a show and you haven't seen it, and you don't know that there's a unique spelling or a unique combination of words that are one word, this will harm your discoverability. Now, there is a workaround for this, okay? And a lot of people don't like this, especially when, this is sort of the conflict between brand and discoverability. Your brand experts, your brand consultants, your brand gurus are always going to tell you your brand is paramount and it should always be displayed the same way everywhere it exists. So if your brand is Her C-Suite Radio, which is HER, and then I think it's a capital C, but it's still all one word, and then suite. But of course, the search engines don't care about capitals. You just type Her C-Suite as one word and you would find this show. But they will tell you everywhere that brand name exists, you need to reinforce that brand. It should be the same way everywhere. Well, you can do that if you want. You can be true to your brand, have it be the same way everywhere, and have very few people find you unless they've seen your name written and know, oh, it's one word. Type it in one word. It's not very intuitive for people when they're searching to do Her C-Suite as one word. Her space C-Suite is probably going to happen 9 times out of 10. And 9 of those people out of 10 are your podcast is not going to come up in that search. And I looked at that myself with this one, tested it many times over, and it's absolutely true. Now, by the time many of you are listening to this episode, I hope it's been fixed, because there is a solution to make sure it comes up, whether somebody types it as one word or 2 words. And you have to be willing to accept that maybe not in the name, the title field of your podcast, which is the name of your show. I would agree. I would display your name there as one word, the way it's intended to be, because that's only one part of your podcast listing. And while the search bar searches through the title field, it also searches through the author field. It also searches through the description field of your show. So my recommendation would be, you've got to spell it incorrectly break your brand guidelines, your brand rules, and upset your brand consultant. And if you're a marketing expert, you have the belief it has to be the same everywhere. I'm going to tell you, you need to suspend this belief and make an exception and bury somewhere in the description of your show the incorrect spelling or presentation of the name of your show, because you want to be found by people that have heard about your show, say, oh yeah, I want to listen to that podcast. And they go to their podcast app to type in your name to go listen, and they can't find the darn podcast. That doesn't help you, and it doesn't help them. So I'm gonna, really recommend all of you podcasters, especially, do-it-yourselfers out there. You have a unique name, that's wonderful. Have that name, promote that name every which way. But then I'm going to say you need to have, 1 foot in the brand identity camp and 1 foot in the discoverability camp, and make sure you have your name written both ways. And hey, maybe you have a name that's hard to know just from hearing it, how it's spelled. Maybe there's 3 different ways people might commonly do it. You better have those 3 different ways it's spelled within the description of your podcast if you want to be found. Today, I'm all about discoverability. That's all I care about right now. Okay. So take that with a grain of salt. Some of you will, but I'm here to help you be found today. And that's what we're going to do. All right. Number 2, unexpected landmines in the author field of your podcast listing. So common mistakes I see in the author field are people put the title of their podcast in the author field, and they're duplicating. You have the title of their podcast in the title field and in the author field. That's a silly mistake, in my opinion. I don't really know why people do that, except maybe they're rushing and they don't know any better. But the author field is intended to be who is the host of the show. Now, there are some exceptions where a podcast is a company podcast, and there may not even be one host. There may be, many different hosts contributing. We supported a podcast years ago that the company reorganized and they stopped the podcast, but it was for Popular Mechanics magazine, called The Most Useful Podcast Ever. And they had a lot of different editors of the magazine contributing and being hosts, and they'd each record a segment, and you'd have multiple hosts. And there are situations where you might say, well, this is the author is Popular Mechanics, and in that case, if your brand is that big, a nationally known name, by all means put that brand name as the author field if it's appropriate, and you don't want to list the names of 6 or 7 contributors in the author field. You can do that, but I often see a lot of new podcasts, unknown brands, not mean unknown nationally. Maybe you're known locally or known somewhat in your niche, but it's a company podcast. So they say, well, this employee who's the host isn't the owner. It's the company name, and they'll put the company name in the author field. I think it's not always the best decision to do that, because the impression it makes that, oh, this is going to be corporate, it's not personal enough, it's not authentic enough. I do think putting a person's name as the host in that author field in most cases would serve people better. But you can certainly put the company name, but if you're going to do that, you better put the host's name or names within the description as well, so that somebody says, hey, I think Tom Hazzard has a podcast. I don't remember the name, but I think he has a show. I think he hosts a podcast. They're going to search on the name. You want to make sure that name is in the show listing somewhere, so that the podcast is discovered, is found. But here's the big landmine. Here's the one which is only going to apply to a portion of you podcasters out there. It's all of you that are co-hosts, or even some of you that might have 3 or 4 hosts or contributors to the show. There often are mistakes made listing those multiple people and making sure that, they can be found. The most common mistake, which again this is going to be unique and applies to only a subset, but I am one because I've experienced it, and I do see it in show audits that come across, my calendar that I meet with people. And it's when you have a husband and wife co-host or a brother and sister co-host, and I've seen both that have the same last name. Most people would, because they think it reads better, it's less formal. So Tracy and I host this podcast, Feed Your Brand, and in the beginning, we put Tom and with an ampersand, the and symbol, Tracy Hazzard. Well, what do you think happened if anybody searched Tom Hazzard in that situation? Tom was separated by an ampersand and Tracy's name way far away from Hazzard. I was a ghost. No one could find me. I wasn't discoverable. And I see this with co-hosts that are husband and wife all the time. It's usually the wife's name is first, ladies first. A lot of the time, some people think. And so they'll have her first name and his first name and last name. That is her last name also. And she is not discoverable. You type her first name and last name together, it's nowhere to be found. So my tip and strong recommendation is don't worry about how it appears that you think it's kind of redundant. Oh, we're writing Tom Hazzard and Tracy Hazzard. You're repeating the Hazzard. That's really unnecessary. Well, in the modern world in 2023 of discoverability, you can't do that. You have to. Somebody says, oh, I know Tracy Hazzard. She has a podcast. Or I know Tom Hazzard. He has a podcast. They're going to search on your first name and last name together. So you need to say Tom Hazzard and Tracy Hazzard or vice versa for discoverability. So that is the big, hidden landmine of the author field. Now, again, you can try to, instead of putting both first names with the last name in the author field, you could add it to the description, but there is a speed to searchability and some hierarchy to searchability, and the search functions in listening apps do search the title first, the author field second, and the descriptions third, and they are going through all of them. So you can put it there, but I still recommend for maximum searchability, it should be the full name in the author field. Okay. So now to the single most ill-considered part of your podcast identity, your podcast listing that's holding you back from being found. Many of you, especially do-it-yourself podcasters, overlook this, spend very little time on it. It is the description of your show, not each episode, the overall show, the show listing. Can't tell you how many of these I see come across in an audit, and they have literally a one-sentence description. The description field is the single most important part of your show's listing and identity, especially when it comes to discoverability. And it is not because I expect people to read through your entire description. I don't. I expect people to read no more than the first sentence, maybe two, before they decide, yeah, this is for me. I'm going to click and give it a try, or they're going to pass. Nope, not for me. I'm moving on. That's not the point. This description field, along with the title field and the author field, to me, it's the most important part, but those are the three most important. The description is the most important part because a lot of people don't know who you are, who are searching for podcasts right now as you're listening to my voice on this podcast. There are people who've decided, yeah, they want to listen to a podcast. They're in their favorite listening app and they're searching right now. And they likely don't know who you are, don't know you have a podcast. They don't know the name of your podcast, but what do they know? They know what their needs are. They know what they want to listen to. They know what they want to learn. And they're searching on those needs. The only place that these search bars within the listening apps have to search through to match up their search with your show is that show description. So this description, you better use every word that they give you, every character available to you to write a description from a perspective of searchability and discoverability, less from a perspective of writing a nice, article. You get no points from your English composition teacher for writing a wonderful, well-written description that should be on the back cover of a book, let's say. No, nothing. It does not help you get discovered. That the search algorithm does not care that you use proper grammar, proper English, spell things properly. It's all about matching up people's searches with shows that are in alignment with what they searched on. So, hyper keyword phrase loaded, everything that you think that people might search on that you think your show should come up in that search, you want in that description. Now, here's another really big tip. And I think a lot of you DIY podcasters who started out, on a bootstrap budget, maybe you just launched your podcast, or maybe you did it years ago, because I find shows that are many years old that have this problem, and they wonder why more people aren't listening to their show. It's an awareness problem, a discoverability problem. And big part of it is there are platforms, and I'm going to call out one of them because it's really the worst offender, and that's Anchor. Anchor, as of the time I'm recording this anyway, and maybe after they hear this episode, they're going to change it. But it's a pretty big ship over there at Spotify who owns Anchor, and I don't think they move too quickly. They limit the number of characters in your description to about 600, I believe. Yeah, it's 6 or 650. I forget the actual number. So you only have 600-ish characters to work with for your description. However, on other platforms, including Podetize, you get 4,000 characters. Why is that? That's the maximum that the whole podcast ecosystem allows. There's a whole system that's been created to deliver podcasts to listeners, and a 4,000 character, not word, but character, amount is the limit for your description. And boy, as a podcaster, you better use all of them, or very darn close. I want to see 3,900 plus characters being used, because otherwise you're just not putting out the maximum amount of contact, of words, of phrases that these apps have to match up searches with your show. So that's the big one. And I can't, people always wonder, I've been podcasting for over a year. I've got 50 episodes, and I think I have maybe about 30 or 40 downloads per episode. I'm not getting a lot of listeners organically through the podcast system. When I see that they have a 2-sentence description, they're really wondering why. And I'm like, well, here's your biggest one now. And you know what? It's such an easy thing to fix. You can rewrite your description. You can record your way to it and transcribe it. Just change it up. Use the maximum number of characters. There are nuances to what should be in there, and, go sign up for an audit at podetize.com/audit if you really, want to get into the nitty gritty of that. But put something in there, be searchable on something. And within a week, that's all going to be, indexed. Whatever you update in your show listing will have been scanned by those listening apps, and it will start to figure into the search. And you should get more listeners, within a week. And if you look at your analytics month over month, you should see an increase in listenership just by doing this last thing I'm telling you with the description. So there you go. That's it. So I told you I was going to geek out a little here. I love this stuff. I love discoverability. The brand gurus don't love this, and we just have to agree to disagree on that. My job in this podcast, helping you as a podcaster get discovered, is all about search. And, you got to play to the algorithms and the bots, because what does it matter if you have this wonderful piece of writing that contains no real valuable search terms for your topic? what does that matter if no one's going to find your show? You want your show to come up in searches. And, especially if you're in a crowded subject matter, like let's say marketing, one of the most popular, business marketing, one of the most crowded, popular, what do you call them, categories of podcasts out there. Tons of content, which is wonderful. And there's tons of content, tons of shows there, because there's, millions of people that want to listen to subject matter in that category. So another one I did an audit with has a podcast name called Clear Brand. Maybe it was Academy or something like that. I'm going from memory, but Clear Brand was one word. And if you didn't type it as one word, it didn't come up. Now, I did an audit with this show and I told them the same thing. And so I hope by the time you search this comes out, they've updated their description and they have Clear Space Brand in their description somewhere, because they're not going to change it in their title. That's the name of the show. That's great. I think Clear Brand Marketing, maybe it was, but then, if you just make some adjustments and you add the incorrect spelling, the off-brand presentation, you're going to be found. And at the end of the day, isn't that really why we're putting out our content and podcasts? So other people can listen and enjoy it and benefit from it. Maybe, want to get more from us, maybe want to work with us. If you're podcasting in business in any way, I hope you're wanting to be heard by more and more people. That's what everything I'm sharing with you today is designed to do. So that's it. I'm not going to belabor it. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back again with another, hopefully very useful and interesting topic for you next time. This has been Tom Hazzard on Feed Your Brand. Okay. That is my story. I'm sticking to it. Now, I know most of you on this call are existing customers, and we may have launched your show, or we may have had an audit with us and you probably heard it before. So thanks for being with me on that. But boy, I've had so many audits lately and new customers coming in with these discoverability problems. I felt like I needed to do something about it today. So I have one question here from Alvin. Is it possible to align the choice of words we use with both Bing and Google, or can one only focus on either one? See if I really, I'll get to you in a moment, Malik, and I'll allow you to speak if you want. So just bear with me and answer this first question. Is it possible to align the choice of words with both Bing and Google? Well, I'll tell you what, Google is the vast majority of searches. I believe Bing is less than 1% of searches on the internet. I personally don't know the nuances or the differences between Google and Bing in terms of SEO. I personally am not an expert on Bing, although I do know Bing is the search engine that the Amazon Alexa uses. It might even be what Siri uses. And I think it's just because those two companies don't play nice with Google. They don't really like each other. I would make yourself in alignment with Google, and you're likely to be in alignment with Bing also. So I'm not an expert in the nuances of that. So I think that's the best I can do to answer that question for you, Alvin. But I do think it is possible to align with both. I mean, they're both trying to do the same things. They're both trying to give you the most relevant, accurate answer for whatever you search on. So the more search terms out there associated with you, the better. Thanks, Cody, for the comment from Facebook. Linda Bonner says that, wow, what a difference, 400-ish to 4,000. It's shocking, isn't it? All right. So Malik says, when you say description, are you talking about the channel description or individual video description? I'm talking about the podcast channel description today. Think of it as a channel, but the podcast listing, so to syndicate or make your podcast available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, Google Podcasts, all the different apps out there, you have a podcast listing. Hopefully you understand that, or if you don't, I mean, there is an RSS feed for your show that is what is submitted to all those apps. And in that RSS feed, there is a description field that gives you up to 4,000 characters. Some of those platforms don't use all those 4,000 characters. Like I mentioned, certainly at Podetize we do, because it's critical. So that's what I'm talking about. Now, your YouTube channel, your video may have, that also has a description. I don't know what its limitation is. It's a little different. I'm talking specifically in the podcast apps. But if you meant not just the channel description, but your individual episode description, maybe that's more what you meant. And I'll allow you to talk if you want to. Feel free to unmute yourself. But I'm thinking that's what you meant now that I read it again. Maybe more about it. Does the episode description figure into the search? It does. The episode descriptions, the individual episodes descriptions do figure into the search. However, the results are not often seen by potential listeners, because in the listening apps, and I may be able to demonstrate this and share my screen here. I'll do that. I'm going to share my Apple Podcast desktop app with you. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, here we go. So this is the Apple Podcast desktop app. Remember I told you I was searching on Her C-Suite, and when I put that space in there, that show didn't come up. First, I'm going to show you this. When I put Her C-Suite together, boom, there's the show that I was talking about. Came up immediately because you see the title, Her C-Suite, is one word there. Okay, so now I'm going to do just another search. I'm going to say, let's say social media marketing, which is an incredibly broad topic. And you think, well, my show's not about social media marketing, but I have a lot of episodes that are. Okay, your episode descriptions do matter, but I want to show you where they show up. Why I wouldn't sort of bet the farm on the episode descriptions saving you if you don't have your show description optimized, because you're always served shows first up top. You have all these different shows about social media marketing. That's where people's eyes are going. That's where they're looking. That's where they're interested. That's where they're going to click first. Okay. The episode descriptions are way below the fold. See how there were shows and channels? I don't even, honestly, I have to look up what these channels are in the Apple Podcast app, because I have to admit, as I'm sharing this with you, I don't even know what that means. So Cody, note to self, we're going to do a little research on that. But you then have episodes. Now, if you've got an episode of a podcast that talks about social media marketing, your episode might show up in this list. Like, let's do this. Amy Porterfield. She is a prolific podcaster, very big name in marketing. She has an episode here that talks about social media marketing. It's not even in the description of the episode. It's down. I mean, it's not in the title of the episode. It's down in the description. But when I search social media marketing, her podcast doesn't even show up in the 20 or so shows that they have decided to present, probably because that term is not in the show description for her podcast. It's in an episode description. But I'm just telling you, you want to show up here above the fold. This is where you want to be presented to people. You do not want to have to make people scroll below the fold and go way down. It's kind of like how many people get to the 4th or 5th page of Google search? Not many. So you want to be on the 1st or 2nd page of Google search. So that's my feeling on that. Malik, I hope that answered your question. If not, clarify or feel free. I allowed you to speak if you want to unmute.
Is the
yeah.
author section also a part of the DSP platforms? It's not a YouTube thing, right?
I'm sorry, DSP. What do you ask? What's that?
Like Apple, Spotify, all that stuff. Like the streaming services.
The author field is a part of the searchability and the podcast listening apps. The streaming services, like you mean YouTube?
No, that's what I mean. Like podcast listening apps, like
Okay.
Apple and Spotify. I guess in music they call them streaming services or streaming. Yeah, right.
So the author field does figure into that. Absolutely.
Correct.
But it's a limited amount of information, right? I mean, and the other thing is when it comes to discoverability, if somebody's searching on your name, you already won the discoverability battle to a large extent because they know who you are and they're looking for you. They're searching on you. Yeah. They're probably going to find you. If they, like if they're searching on a name like Tracy Hazzard and nothing comes up, they may think, well, maybe Tracy spells her name without an E before the Y, and they'll try spelling it a different way, things that are pretty intuitive, and they're probably going to find you. So if they're searching on the name of your show or your name, they're probably going to end up finding you one way or another, if they try hard enough, except for some of these strange name spellings like I was sharing with you, like, her C-suite, 2 words than one. If they don't think to do that, maybe they won't find you. But that's why the description field is so important. Because if somebody knows the name of your show, they've heard it, or they know your name, they've heard it, and they think you have a podcast, they're going to search on you and maybe eventually find you. What about the millions of other people searching who don't know your show name and don't know your name? Your description can match them up with your show if they search on their needs, their interests, what they're wanting to learn, as long as whatever those terms are within your description. So that's the big opportunity. It casts a much wider net for you to be found using.
I understand.
Does that make sense?
And this is all in the Apple Musics, the Spotify's. It's not really related to YouTube as much, is it?
Not as much. I mean, YouTube is owned by Google and is part of their search engine, and you definitely want to have robust descriptions in the YouTube videos and channel descriptions for your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
But that's a whole different animal.
Okay.
And honestly, YouTube is much better search engine than the podcast listening apps are. So okay. I would, but again, a lot of people though, who prefer to listen aren't even looking in YouTube. They're going to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or iHeart first. And
then discovering the YouTube channel from that.
They can, but only if they find your show, look at your show, look at one of your, listen to one of your episodes, and in the description of that episode is a link to the YouTube channel. Sure, yeah, they'll probably find it that way, but it's pretty roundabout way. They will have already found you and probably started listening to you before they find the YouTube link and go check out that channel.
Okay. That sounds great. Thank you.
I would definitely have the YouTube channel and links within those episode descriptions, and even the YouTube channel link in your show description. You can do that too. I don't think people are I don't think that helps discoverability, but it does raise awareness. Hey, there's a YouTube channel. I can click and go look at that. But if they're searching in a listening app, chances are they prefer to listen than watch anyway.
Makes sense.
Think about that.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Alvin says, I set up a lot of computers for people, and new installation Windows 10 or 11 makes Bing the default search engine. So defaulting to Google is a conscious, deliberate move. Hence, Bing not as irrelevant as we hope. Okay. Alvin, I hear you. I agree. I mean, Microsoft had the Edge browser in their default operating system, or maybe still does. There are lots of other browsers. I mean, and Safari, these are browsers, I guess, and maybe you're saying Windows 10 makes Bing the default search engine. Yeah. Okay, I get you now. So I hear that, but the statistics of how many people search on Google versus Bing, I mean, the disparity is huge. I mean, I still believe Bing is less than 1% of searches on the internet, even though it's the search engine Alexa uses. I use my Alexa all the time. But I think a lot of computer users, and I don't know what percentage. I actually read an article about this once, but I don't remember the details as so much. But most people don't use the default browser on their computer. I'm a Mac user. I don't use Safari. Safari has issues and is glitchy, and a lot of websites aren't properly optimized for it. I use Chrome. Before I used Chrome, I used Firefox. Even on, and I have a Windows PC laptop also, and I'd still download and use Chrome browser just because it works so much better. There's all these great extensions for it, and things like that. So I don't really have a problem with Bing. I know Bing has this great API. If you want to do any kind of coding and searches and stuff, you can use it to do some automated searching, which is great. But still, I mean, I sort of, in this situation, I'm going to say, let's make sure we fish where the fish are. There's a lot more fish of people searching on Google than there is of Bing. But I still contend that if you are creating content and listings and all these things that are in alignment with Google, they're probably not out of alignment with Bing. I mean, they're trying to be providing search results on the same terms to people. So hopefully it's not, hopefully you're not hurting yourself by being in alignment with Google. I know it's kind of pointless to have a Mac PC debate or a, Google Bing debate. You like what you like, and that's great. Again, my whole point today is to help you be found. Ultimately, that's critical in order to make sure the people who, I mean, think about this, the people who want to listen to you, who want to listen to the topics you talk about, and you're an expert in what you talk about. I know you are. So, why make it harder for them to find you, even though they don't know you? Make sure you are discoverable with what your ideal listener would search on. That's the end of the day. That's what we're talking about here. So, and I could talk about it all day, every day. I love this stuff. And I can't, I see so many sort of face palm moments when I'm auditing a podcast. And you can really tell somebody that either just really does not care or is really naive. That's maybe the nice way to put it. And to me, if you are not spending time to put in more than a 3 or 4 word description, and I've seen that, a 3 or 4 word description, to me, that just shows a listener, you're not putting much effort into it. You don't care so much. I mean, if you've got a paragraph or 2 or 3 paragraphs, 300, 400 characters, you care. You just probably had no idea, my gosh, there was 10 times that space available to you, and what the benefits are of using all that space. That's different. Being unaware, nothing negative about that. You're just unaware. You didn't know, you don't know what you don't know. But if you really sort of don't take the time to make any kind of a real description to try to let people know who find your show what it's about, what your intent is, that says something else. I think I've seen it all in podcast industry, but I still love it. It's fun. Cool. Any other comments or questions, Cody, on social?
No comments. No questions.
Cool.
We are having some people tune in, so.
All right, cool. Well, it doesn't have to be on this subject either. Some of you that are new to this, if you have any other questions, I mean, this is your opportunity to ask something and get some support right now. With no questions, I'm gonna give a shout out here to Cody because it's his birthday today. Happy birthday, Cody.
Hey, thank you very much.
And thank you for working on your birthday.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, we have a lot to do here, but we're celebrating tonight at dinner, so that'll be good.
Good. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, and I have my show this weekend, so can't really
That's
do
right.
too many
Well,
weekend plans right now.
Hey, yeah, Cody does acting on the side, community acting, so fun stuff.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you, Tom.
You're welcome. Let's see. All right. I guess if we don't have any more questions or comments, there's no point in, just spending more time. We're here for all of you that are wanting to get more out of your podcast and creating these topics we hope will be of interest and useful. But if you have any other topic ideas or questions you have, please let us know, and we'll
Yes.
be happy to add that. We're doing this every month. We're spending some intentional time planning out topics we think will be useful and helpful to all of you. But we're very happy to steer that ship in your direction should you have a need. So please remember that.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right. Thank you, Kevin.
Next week, we're going to be talking about the power of consistency.
My pleasure, Malik. Thank you. The what now? The what?
The power of consistency.
Power of consistency. You know what? Yeah. And I was just talking with another prospect about that who's about to launch a podcast, and it's a pretty exciting show. I can't really talk much about it yet because there's a sort of a right now a confidential portion of that, but it's going to come out like by the end of March or early April, and then I'll be able to talk about it. And when I do, I'm probably going to have to revisit this issue of consistency because we had this specific discussion that's like something else they're doing outside of podcasting that's not as frequent, and they want a podcast relative to that, related to that, and had this whole discussion about, well, that's great. If you want to have a successful podcast, you got to publish consistently and constantly in order to really grow that fan base and benefit this other thing you're doing. So we'll come back to that. But yeah, that's a great topic. And I have some fun stuff to share about that, and some sort of cautionary tales and some success stories that'll probably be helpful for that whole discussion too. Awesome. All right. Well, I think I'm going to wrap it. Thank you all for coming and expressing your appreciation. I do appreciate that you're here. Those of you that can be here live are here live. Remember, those of you watching the recording, noon Pacific every Wednesday, we're here for you. And we hope to see you joining soon. It's nice to see some new faces, people that aren't here every time. So thanks so much, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you.
See you next one. Bye.